Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to the first live session of the Scicomm for Scientists workshop being organized by ISEF Kolkata, sponsored by DST under the Karyashala scheme. We are extremely pleased that we are able to do this workshop virtually, and we have participants from all over the country who have applied for this workshop and got selected from among 100 odd applicants. And we have a great lineup of speakers over this entire week. Some of the sessions are going to be hands-on and closed door for participants only, but then we are going to have 8 live streaming sessions on YouTube on this channel, and everyone is welcome to join us for these sessions and engage with the speakers. It's a great pleasure for us and personally for me to welcome Professor Raghavendra Gadagkar for the keynote address of this workshop. Professor Gadagkar needs no introduction to this audience, but since it's the norm, I will formally introduce him. He is a behavioral biologist. He has spent his career observing and documenting behavior in the social wasp Rhopileria marginata. Currently, he is Europe Science Chair Professor at the Center for Ecological Sciences, Indian Institute of Science. He has numerous awards and honors to his name, including the Shantiswara Bhatnagar Award, the TWAS Prize, the Cross of the Order of Merit Germany. He has been elected as a fellow of all the 3 science academies of India, Indian National Science Academy, Indian Academy of Sciences Bangalore, and National Academy of Sciences India. He is a foreign fellow of the National Academy of Sciences USA. He is a fellow of the German Academy of Sciences Leopoldina, and he is a fellow of the World Academy of Sciences. He writes extensively. He actually writes a column every fortnight in the Wire Science, which is an absolute pleasure to read for anyone, not just scientists, but anyone who's interested to look around and enjoy questions, enjoy nature, and is generally curious. He has written a fantastic book, which I recommend to every student who is interested in animals and animal behavior and ecology. This is a book called Survival Strategies. And this is something that has initiated me into the field of animal behavior when I was an undergrad student. I was lucky that this book was published when I was doing my undergrad, and that is how I got initiated to this field myself. He also has written a more technical book on his research on Rhopileria marginata. It's called The Social Biology of Rhopileria marginata, and that book itself, is, though a more technical book, is also a great pleasure to read. So he also has recently published a book from the Indian Academy of Sciences, which is a compilation of essays he's been writing for the journal Resonance. And this book is freely available to download from the internet, from the IIS website. And it talks about how one or anyone can do simple experiments in animal behavior with very little funds, just curiosity, the ability to ask questions, and enthusiasm. And this, again, I recommend to anyone and everyone, whether you want to do animal behavior as your research career or not. I am personally acquainted with Professor Gadagkar for many years because I did my PhD with him, and it's always a pleasure to welcome him for a talk. I decided that his should be the first talk that you listen to because that will give you a very, very nice impression of how you can be a scientist and a fantastic communicator at the same time. So welcome, sir, and
Thank you, Anindita. Can I start now? Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Yes.
Can you all hear me? Okay. So I'm delighted to be here, although I'm not sure how qualified I am to be here. You will hear a large number of really professional science communicators during the course of this week, and they are the ones who really will tell you what to do. But Anindita said I should give a talk in the beginning. Now, as you all know, you can somehow get away by telling your teachers, no, I can't do this, but you can't tell your students, no, I can't do this. So I have agreed to do this. I will try and convey to you my passion for communication. I don't think I can give you much advice, but I'll tell you my story and you can then take it along as you wish. Let me begin sharing my screen. It says entire screen, all right? What should I do? Allow. Okay. Select window or screen, it says.
Yes, you can present the screen.
Yes, I think this is the one. Here I try. Is this the one? No. No. There are several options here.
Entire screen?
The entire thing went after. Yes, this is the one. I got it. Yes. Can
Yes,
you
it's coming.
see my first slide?
Yes, we can see. Yes, we can see.
Okay, but at this time I don't see anybody, but I suppose you will all be there and not have gone away.
Yes, yes, we are all there. Don't worry.
I don't seem to have a window where I can see myself or any of you because I shared the entire screen.
Yeah, that's a
That's the
problem.
reason. But anyway, I will try and speak to the screen. Okay, so on the left side of my slide, you see the various people who are going to.
Sir, can you put it on the presentation mode? It's not there
I
in the
have put
presentation
on the
mode.
it's not on the presentation mode.
No,
Oh, then I
kind
think
of coming in the middle.
no.
No.
No, no. 1 second.
Maybe you could close it and do this again.
See, now it is for me not on the presentation mode. 1 second. Okay.
Sometimes putting it in the reading mode helps.
Everyone, it says here.
Maybe can you make it in view full screen? I don't know, view full screen. That
And
might
now
help.
I see that you are presenting, it says, and then it says stop presenting. I don't know. What can you see now? Can you see anything now?
Yeah, it's only a fraction of the screen actually.
Yeah, it's not the full screen actually that we can see. Somehow it's in the middle.
No? No?
No, it's stuck, sir. You have to close it and do this again, I think.
Okay. Then I'll stop sharing.
Maybe just share the window. It might help. And sometimes it's the
Yes. Okay.
interface which is good.
I will say a window, and then I will use. No?
It's coming. Yes.
Is it now
Yes,
in the
it's fine.
full screen?
Yes, it's perfect.
Full
Yes,
screen?
it's perfect.
Okay.
Yes, full screen.
Good. Okay. So on the left side, I have just put the poster where I said you will have many professionals speak to you, but I have a theme which I want to try and articulate today. And that theme is that there should be no division of labor, meaning that scientists must communicate and communicators must produce knowledge. We can't have some people do one and some people do the other, so there should be no division of labor. Let me begin by giving you an overview of my talk. Not allowing me to advance my slide in the usual way. Okay. Anindita, you should tell me if something goes wrong because I can't see any of
Yes,
you.
yes.
Whether
We have the overview coming up.
Wonderful. So if something goes wrong, you will please tell me. Okay.
Sure.
I want to begin by giving you an overview of my talk. There should be no division of labor between scientists and science communicators or science writers. Now, we use these terms interchangeably. For the rest of this talk, I will use the phrase science writers. Scientists cannot leave communication entirely to someone else, any more than science writers can leave knowledge production entirely to someone else. The joy of communication should be an important driver for knowledge production. And the joy of knowledge production must be an important driver for science writing. Why do I do science? Part of the reason is because of the joy I'm going to have to tell somebody about it. That should be part of the reason why I'm doing science. Why do I want to communicate? because in doing so, I am creating new knowledge which was not already there in what I have read, which I am trying to communicate. In the process of communicating, I am creating knowledge. And that's one of the reasons why I would like to communicate. So these are for me the drivers. As Anindita said, I try to do both. I try to do science, I also try to communicate. And a major driver for me for producing knowledge is I can talk about it. I can show people, I can tell people. And I also like to write, I like to communicate. And the joy of that is in the process of writing, especially in the process of speaking, I get new ideas, I produce new things. I have often stopped my lecture in my class and opened my notebook and made little notes because I get an idea which I wouldn't have got unless I was trying to explain to some undergraduate student who kept on saying, but sir, I don't understand you. And in trying to make her or him understand, I learn new things. And that's how it should proceed. Now, some may say this is a dream, but for this dream to be realized, we actually need a paradigm shift in the culture of science. And I'm going to elaborate on this a little bit. I realize that I'm speaking to M.Sc and Ph.D. students, but you are really, as far as I'm concerned, full-fledged scientists, full-fledged communicators. There is no reason to treat you as children. You are adults, and I'm going to treat you like scientists. And from the introductions I've heard, there is no problem at all in my treating you as my colleagues. How do we bring about this cultural change? The onus of bringing about a paradigm shift is on today's students who will be tomorrow's leaders of science. So over to scientists. So let me first address scientists. In fact, for much of this talk, I will address scientists, and towards the end, I'll spend a little bit of time addressing science writers. So scientists. Scientists should not merely be producers of knowledge, but they should be effective communicators as well. This is just what Professor Ian Banerjee told in his introduction. This is extremely important. But how do we do this? In order to be able to do this, we should read voraciously and indiscriminately, including a generous helping of fiction. I put stars on the word indiscriminately and fiction because I want to emphasize these words. If we only read what we like, we will never know what is good style. It's only by reading things we like and we don't like we can make the comparison. So in your reading, please don't be choosy. Be indiscriminate. Only then you will be able to discern what is good writing and what is bad writing. Fiction. Scientists think that reading fiction is a waste of time. When I ask my undergraduate students to introduce themselves, I always ask them to tell me, what have you read? And they apologetically say, mostly fiction, sir. I said, no, but that's no apology. Reading fiction is extremely important. Writing fiction and reading fiction, I would argue, are more important than writing and reading non-fiction. Imagine, when you write fiction, you are creating something which doesn't exist, which is much harder than simply to convey something that already exists. Your imagination is in full play when you are writing fiction, and your imagination, your capacity for imagination is stimulated when you are reading fiction. So reading fiction is extremely important. Don't think of it as extracurricular activity, as a waste of time. Don't be apologetic about it. There should be a generous helping of fiction in your selection of reading. This, of course, means you need to read a lot. There is so much to read. Start early. Life is short. The number of books to read are huge and so many, and you really need to read as much as you can, indiscriminately, I said, including fiction. But reading is not enough. We should pay attention to form, not just to content. And this scientists find very difficult. They, in fact, don't worry about form. They are completely oblivious to form. They're only looking for content. And that is a mistake. If you're only looking for content, you are never going to be a good communicator. So we must pay attention to form, not just to content. But we must go beyond that. Paying lip service, saying I'm also interested in form, is not sufficient. You have to discipline yourself, rank what you read. We should rank what we read on a scale of 1 to 5 for style, not just for content, for style. And then state the reasons for our ranking. Why did I like that style? Why didn't I like in this style? What did I not like in this? What did I like in that? It's only this kind of a confession of the reasons for your likes and dislikes. And of course, you should have likes and dislikes. You should not like everything. You should stand up and say, I don't like this author. But you must at least tell yourself, why? Why don't I like this? It is when you make this confession of the reason for your likes and dislikes, that will help you to develop your own style. So you don't want to copy somebody's style. You want to develop your own unique style. And the only way to do that is to articulate, at least for yourself, the reasons for liking and not liking something else. And of course, in order to do this, you will see that, of course, you must read voraciously and indiscriminately. If you read only what you like, then the whole exercise is not possible. Not only that, you must do more. We should also read books offering advice on writing. I do not think that we should only read books. We should also read books which offer us advice. But one of the main reasons why we should read books offering advice is that we must try and disagree with that advice. Only if you cannot disagree, accept the advice. Try your best to disagree. And this is actually a very good mantra for everything else. Whether it is you are listening to your parents or your teachers, try and see whether logically you can really disagree. If you can, then it's fine. But when you cannot, then you agree. And this is very important for writing. So I will give you several examples of what I do, what I read, what interests me, and so on. So first, let me deal with tools. Now, there are, of course, many tools which promise to help you to become a great writer. These are two used. One is called Grammarly, and the other is called Writing Guide. These have become extremely popular. Institutions are buying them, buying institutional license, making it available to all students. So they have become rampant. There is some good in it, and there's a great deal of bad in them. There's a great deal of danger in using them. There is some good, so we have to be extremely careful. I use both of them regularly. However, I use writing aids, this kind of writing aids, and there are many more. Whichever you want, you can use. I use them very gingerly. Else, they can make us all into unthinking, boring, uniform robots, writing for a computer and not for human beings. This is something you have to be very, very cautious about. I think these writing aids are very good to correct errors. I use them a lot because I make a lot of errors. I use them to correct errors in spelling, punctuation, grammar, commas, pronouns, articles. Indians writing English have great difficulty in articles. They don't know when to use the definite article, when to use the indefinite article, and when not to use an article. If you count the mistakes, there are mistakes are more common than the correct ones. So it's not a matter of chance. So we have to get help in these things. Prepositions. These are very troublesome for many people, especially non-native speakers. Then there are these wonderful things. I just love these names. Unclear antecedent. Unclear antecedent means you begin a sentence with a pronoun. This, you say. And the reader doesn't know what is that this referring to. You say he, you say she, and you don't know what it is referring to. And you have to make clear what it is. So this is what is called an unclear antecedent. So what comes before this is unclear. Then there are even more wonderful things called squinting modifiers. I will let you go and find out what this is. It's a wonderful thing to know about. Squinting modifiers should not be used, but it's even more fun to find out what they are. By not finding out what you are likely to use it by chance alone. So find out what it is. Even more interesting is a thing called split infinitive. And people don't like that you use split infinitive. Find out what is split infinitive. It's a great fun just finding out this. But I seldom accept the advice on style given by these softwares. It's very dangerous to do that. Be extremely careful in that. In fact, I'll give you a very interesting exercise. Take a famous, well-written passage, very famous, I don't know who Einstein has written, or take King's speech on I Have a Dream or whatever. Take something very famous, run this software to that, accept all their advice, and what you will see is not even worth putting in the garbage. So if you accept their advice on style indiscriminately, you are completely lost. But what I do is I'm interested in what is the advice they are giving me. And I find reasons, ways to disagree. I justify why I am rejecting this advice. When, like a robot, they count the number of words and say this sentence is too long, I justify why I want this many words. Or each of those advice, I quarrel with these softwares. I disagree with them most of the time, but not blindly. I actually take their advice and justify to myself why I disagree with them. Now, as you all know, the internet has robbed away all excuses. Today, you have no excuse for anything, because anything you wanted to know, anything you wanted to find out, all you have to do is you have to take your mouse and click and you find it. So there is no excuse anymore. And we should use this facility. I find it surprising that many students I have met, I say, when did you last look up something in a dictionary? They can't quite remember when. And this is impossible for me to operate. I look at the dictionary several times every day. Now it's so easy. There are hundreds of online dictionaries. So constantly, if I look up, I'm reminded of what it means. Often these dictionaries tell me multiple meanings of a word, or what the origin of that word is, or how that meaning of that word has changed over the last 2 centuries. And these are all very interesting, but also very useful in trying to craft something that you're going to write. Then I have this wonderful tool which I've been using for decades. Everybody knows what a thesaurus is, but there is something called a visual thesaurus. Just to illustrate that, I gave the word style, because we are talking about style, and you see the diagram it gives me. Can you see this on the right side? So there is a starfish-like figure, and the multiple meanings of the word style are illustrated here. You can click any one of those and it will give you another starfish. And you can explore the entire English language simply by navigating. You type any one word and then you click on subsequent words and you can navigate through the entire language. And you can understand the spatial symmetry or asymmetry, or the spatial relations between words. And that gives you a kind of feeling which is very, very important. For many decades, I begin my day with this thing called a word a day. I subscribe to this free newsletter, wonderful thing created by an engineer of Indian origin in the USA called Garg, and he has this wonderful daily email newsletter in which he tells you about one word every day. Not just its meaning, not its pronunciation, but its history, its etymology, its usage, and so on. In fact, the New York Times has called this the most welcomed, most enduring piece of daily mass email in cyberspace. And I agree. It is really the most enduring, the most welcomed piece of mass email. I get lots of mass email, but this one I won't miss for the word I look at. Now, Garg has gone ahead and also wonderful books. Here is a book called A Word a Day, and here is a book called The Diglot, and an Avocado or Two. These books are delightful to read, and they're a lot of fun to read. And so this kind of reading is not directed towards something, but it just entertains you, and in the process of entertaining, it educates you. Now, there are, of course, more formal guides. The mother of all guides for writing in English is this book by William Strunk, The Elements of Style. This is the Bible everybody refers to. This is the mother of all guides. Now, William Strunk was a professor of English in Cornell, and he loved to teach a course on writing. Now, this is the turn of the last century, and he was an old-fashioned professor, and he never wrote a book, but he had notes. And his students would write down all the words of wisdom he would give them. One of the students was E.B. White in his class, and E.B. White later on decided that I'm going to publish my notes. And this book began as E.B. White's notes that he took in the class of William Strunk. And this has now gone through many editions. As I said, it's the Bible. I would say it's full of gems. Read it from cover to cover and keep going back to it, which is what I do all the time. Not necessarily to copy, not necessarily to agree, but to understand. Then there are hundreds of books, doesn't matter which ones, you can read whatever you like. This is one of my favorites. I think this is wonderful bedtime reading. So you can dream about writing and dream about writing well by reading this just before you go to bed. Another real favorite of mine and a great surprise is Stephen King. We all know Stephen King as the writer of the thrillers. He has written more than 70 novels, which are all best-selling thrillers. But he's also written a book on advice about writing. Now, who better to tell us about writing than best-selling author of 70 books? I only recently came to know that he has written this book, and it's delightful. But remember what it's called. See what it says. It says a memoir of the craft. Now read this book. Defying King with self-confidence is a sure road to success. Read this book and see if you can disagree with King. Then you are successful. But the real bonus is King's remarkable memoir disguised as advice. Half of this book is about his life. It's his autobiography. And that is what makes the book even more interesting. But notice one thing. It is not disguised. He actually calls it a memoir of the craft. So he is giving a memoir of the craft of writing, which is also his memoir because his whole life is writing. What is Stephen King if not writing? That's why it's called a memoir of the craft. But what you will get is a memoir about Stephen King's life. It's delightful. Please read it. There are many. One of my favorites, closer home, my friend Yatindra Joshi has written a fantastic book called Communicating in Style. Another gem, and if you notice from the blurb of the book, even John Le Carre agrees with me that this is a gem. Don't miss reading blurbs on the front cover, on the back cover. Don't miss reading forewords. Don't miss reading preface. Don't miss reading acknowledgements. Those are the juiciest things to read. And that's where the authors actually take much more liberty. Those are the most wonderful things. So never miss reading those and just read the whole book. You want to be entertained even more? I hope all of you have read or will read this delightful thing called Eats, Shoots and Leaves. It's an absolute delight. It makes you laugh out loud. Now I come to more serious, more profound books. Richard Dawkins some years ago edited a book in which he put together what he considered was the best science writing. Not his writings, but writings of other people. And they are wonderful to read. Some of them are as short as a paragraph. Some of them are as long as 10 pages, but they're all wonderful to read. And New Scientist says, if you could only ever read one science book, this should probably be it. Why? Because you will read 100 authors through this book. I have deliberately put two cover pictures of this book. The one on the left side is the official one. The one on the right side is freely available on the internet. It's the same book, but you can easily find it on the internet, and it's wonderful to read. Now, why should we do all this? We should make writing in style a matter of prestige. This is not common, believe me. Certainly not common among scientists. It is not a matter of prestige. And I want to dwell on this sad situation a little bit more. And I want to introduce you to a very famous book called The Two Cultures, written by a man called C.P. Snow. You probably haven't read it yet, but someday you should read it. It talks about the comparison of the philosophy with which scientists work and people in the humanities work, and what the differences are and what they mean, what they should and so on. So it's a very famous book. It's an all-time classic. It will never go out of fashion, and people, generation of generation, will read it. But today I don't want to talk about the two cultures. Remember what I said. Don't miss the preface. Don't miss the foreword. There is a foreword to this book. And in the foreword to this book, again, an English professor called Stefan Collini, he makes a charge against scientists. He finds fault with scientists. He says, in many forms of experimental science, writing plays no really creative role. That arranging one's findings in intelligible form is regarded by many research scientists as something of a chore. And that elegance of style tends not to be cultivated or prized as a professional ideal. In fact, he gives the example saying scientists say, I have to write up my results. That write up itself suggests that it's a chore that you have to somehow do it. You can't help it, but not something that you really enjoy. People say, oh, I would rather do the next experiment than write up my present experiment. Then you haven't enjoyed your experiment. You haven't understood. You have no passion about what you have found. If you don't want to tell other people in the way that they can understand what you have found, you really haven't enjoyed it, probably haven't even understood it. But that's not true in the humanities. This book is about comparing science and humanities, so in the foreword he does say. But in the humanities subjects, not only may the most creative thinking be done in the very process of writing, but the manner in which a book or article is written is itself the chief embodiment of the level of understanding that has been reached. Now, I agree with Collini's charge against scientists, but we must all change the world of science so that this charge is no longer true. If the next edition of C.P. Snow's book is published and Stephen Collini is again asked to write the foreword, he should say, I take back my words. It was true then, but it is no longer true today. That should be our goal. Perhaps my all-time favorite is this book. Because first of all, we came to a great surprise. Very recently, about a year ago, a friend of mine told me that, did you know that Umberto Eco is of course the famous Italian polymath, novelist. Many of you may have read his book In the Name of the Rose, or at least seen the movie. Please read the book, even if you have seen the movie, even if you have not seen the movie. That book is worth reading from cover to cover. It's of course a work of fiction. My friend said, but he has written a book called How to Write a Thesis. I said, what? Umberto Eco, a book on how to write a thesis? I found it. Again, it's easily available. It's delightful. On the surface, it appears as if it's only meant for people in the humanities. On the surface, it appears as if it's only meant for people doing research 50, 75 years ago when they were using index cards. But read it and you will see how relevant it is today. This is one of the finest actually, the finest advice books I've read. In the guise of advice on how to write a thesis, Umberto Eco gives us much more advice on how to do research. And when I first read it, it is this disguise that so appealed to me. Just like in the case of Stephen King's book, the disguise of what a memoir is, whether it's a memoir of Stephen King or a memoir about writing or about a memoir about Stephen King, the writer, that ambiguity always excites me. And here again, this disguise of giving advice on how to do research in the name of how to write a thesis appealed to me. Why did I think it was a disguise? Because in science, we do our work and then we do this boring job of writing a thesis. But I realized after reading this book that for Umberto Eco, write your thesis means do research. The research is done in the process of writing in the humanities, as we saw in Stephen Collini's quotation. Even though I had read Stephen Collini's foreword, when I read this book, I enjoyed it first time, thinking, oh, what a wonderful disguise. What a wonderful idea to catch students saying how to write a thesis. They will definitely read it because they have to write their thesis. And then I'm going to sneak in advice on how to research. But that's not that. That is the process of doing research. There are hundreds of books. Read what you like. I'm telling you what I like. Steven Pinker, of all the people, has written a book called A Sense of Style. And this book has been called The Thinking Person's Guide to Writing in the 21st Century. Stephen King, like no one else, has told us about the science of writing well. Why does something look good, not good? Why something works, does not work? After all, he's a psychologist. So as a psychologist, he tells us what are the principles behind good writing. And this is a wonderful book to read. A quote from Steven Pinker, style, not least, adds beauty to the world. To a literate reader, a crisp sentence, an arresting metaphor, a witty aside, an elegant turn of phrase are among the life's greatest pleasures. This thoroughly impractical virtue of good writing is where the practical effort of mastering good writing must begin. Read this book. It's delightful to read. What we must realize, scientists, is there is no trade-off between form and content. We think that if we pay attention to form, content loses its importance. If you pay attention to content, then form is not important. This trade-off is a mistaken notion. Now, do you need, non-scientists will ask me, do you really have to say that there is no trade-off between form and content? A wonderful train goes by next to my window, which I usually enjoy very much. But when I give a lecture, I pause for a minute in the train to pass. Did you hear the train?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we heard the whistle.
Yeah, sir.
I'm just making sure you're hearing me. Okay. So people say, silly, do you really have to say that there is no trade-off? Unfortunately, for scientists, we have to say. And I will elaborate why. I'll give you a very simple, hypothetical, imaginary anecdote. We never hear of one scientist tell another, oh, I read that paper in Nature last night. It was so well written. You will never hear a scientist say this to another scientist. If you indeed make such a remark, it will likely be construed as a backhanded compliment, suggesting that there was not much substance in the paper. This is our attitude. If you say, I read that paper in Nature, it was well written, means you are saying that it didn't have very much in it. This is the world in which scientists live, and that is what has to change. I'm glad I'm addressing people who are on the cusp of becoming scientists, so you can avoid the mistakes that others before you have made. You're still capable of incorporating these things. I'm recently reading this book by the previous book of Richard Dawkins I mentioned was where he put together writings by others. This is writings by him. And this is not writings by him or his articles or his books, but his forewords and afterwards and introductions and reviews of books. And this kind of genre I like very much because they give you so much more freedom. So he has put together and introduced and told us a little more. In fact, this book has been called An Electrifying Celebration of Science Writing, both fiction and non-fiction, and I couldn't agree more. But what I like most in this book is that Richard Dawkins starts by defining literature. He says, what is literature? Now, he refers to the Oxford English Dictionary and says there are at least two major meanings of the word literature. Nothing like going back to dictionary and starting from there. The first meaning A, literature is that kind of written composition valued on account of its qualities of form and emotional effect. But there's a second meaning for the word literature. The B meaning is the body of books and writings that treat a particular subject. Now, this is the impoverished meaning that we scientists are stuck with. When you say literature, we say, oh, we do a literature survey for doing our experiment. We only think of the body of books or writings or subject. We don't think of composition, which is valued on account of its quality and form and emotional effect. That is the kind of definition of literature we should pay attention to, not just the B form. In fact, Dawkins elaborates, by the literature of science in this essay, I mean something closer to the A definition from the OED above, not the B definition. I'm talking about science as literature, good writing on the theme of science. This usually means books rather than scientific journals. And here, Dawkins is being sarcastic. He's saying maybe when scientists write books, they write reasonably well, but when they write paper, they certainly don't write very well. That's why he says, when I talk about this, usually I mean books rather than journals. In fact, he goes on to say, I think that's a pity. There is no obvious reason why a scientific paper shouldn't be gripping and entertaining. No reason why scientists shouldn't enjoy the articles it is their professional duty to read. I have more to say about how badly we write scientific papers. Dawkins says, I feel I have a mission to persuade my scientific colleagues to write their science as if they had a lay person looking over their shoulder, not to write in a language which is completely opaque to other people, which is exactly what we do. I believe they will do better science if they do that. I think they will communicate with other scientists better if they do that. I even think they will understand better the science that they themselves are doing if they follow this particular kind of writing. Some years ago, I was invited to contribute an essay in a volume that was being published in honor of a dear friend of mine who was retiring from administration. And this kind of genre also I like very much because they say, please contribute an essay. They don't tell you anything else. They don't tell you what it should be about, how it should be written, who should be the target audience, how long it should be, whether you should follow advice given by Grammarly. They tell you nothing. So they give you freedom. And that freedom is just wonderful. So I wrote an essay called The Luxury of Introspection. And I actually talked in this essay about 3 things that I enjoy introspecting about. One of them was about science communication. And in this, again, this genre gives you freedom. So I was as provocative as I could be as provocative as I like. So I was very provocative in this essay. And in the section on science communication, I put down very boldly 2 propositions. The fact that I called them proposition itself was an act of arrogance. Proposition 1. In an ideal world, there should be no need for science communicators as distinct from scientists. The producers of knowledge should be able to successfully communicate their findings to all the rest of the world. Indeed, they should be able to do so better than anybody else. Now, I have already said enough for you to realize that when I say in an ideal world, there should be no need for science communicators as distinct from scientists. I am not saying there should be no need for science communicators. I am saying there should be no need for science communicators as distinct from scientists. That's because I want science communicators to also become scientists. So there is no distinction. Proposition 2. In an ideal world, there should be no difference between communicating science through the medium of a peer-reviewed technical science journal on the one hand and through a newspaper article on the other. So people always laugh at me and they say, the ones who want to be nice to me, they say you are an idealist. The ones who want to be nasty to me say that you live in a fool's paradise. None of this is possible. I've never understood why it's a wrong thing to be an idealist. I've never understood why it's a wrong thing to dream of an ideal world. It is impossible, but that's exactly why I want, remember my emphasis on fiction. Why am I interested in fiction? Because it's not true, it didn't happen. That's why I'm interested in ideal world. The real world is there, so we can see it every day. Some of it is good, some of it is bad, some of it is ugly. But the ideal world, which is not there, that is far more interesting. And at the very least, I think we should recognize where is the ideal world, what direction. Face that direction and stand. Step 1, face the direction which will take you to the ideal world. Step 2, take 1 or 2 steps in the direction of the ideal world and see whether there will be an earthquake. Most probably there won't be. Nothing worse will happen. You may never reach there, but that's not important. That much at least we can do. Now it turns out that the proposition 1 actually is achievable. Proposition 2 will take more time. It will take time when all of you M.Sc and Ph.D. students listening to my talk become scientists. Today it's not possible. But the first one is possible even today. Now, therefore, I will talk about how to make the first one possible. How to make the first one possible where there is no distinction between science communicators and scientists, and how both should be both. Scientists, because proposition 2 is not ready to be realized, I'm assuming that proposition 2 is not ready to be realized, but proposition 1 can be attempted. Therefore, in the meanwhile, in the interim, as a stopgap arrangement, scientists should publish their work 3 times. First, they should write for a technical audience, not necessarily in the boring way, but as Dawkins says, in a way that everybody can understand. They should try their best. But since proposition 2 has not been realized, they should write again for a non-technical but scientific audience. I do work in ecology. I want a physicist to understand. I want a mathematician to understand. I want an information theorist to understand. So right now, that has to be a separate one. Finally, for a non-scientific audience, I want my grandmother to understand. I want the man sitting next to me in the bus to understand. That is in the time when we were traveling in buses. Doesn't seem to be possible now, but that's what I want. So we must write 3 times. Now, I think people say, you live in a fool's paradise. And we don't have time to write one thing where you're asking us to write 3 times. That is the problem. That is where we must change. The culture of science should change to make it possible for scientists to do small quantities of high quality science and devote more time for better education. Now, you will of course say, you keep saying culture of science, who will change it? Wait till the end of my lecture and I will tell you who will change the culture of science. But it can be changed. We have to be bold. If we are not bold, nothing will happen. I have many heroes. I recently wrote in one of the articles in my column that Anindita Bhadra was mentioning about heroes, about the joys and burdens of heroes. Heroes can bring you joy, heroes can bring you grief when they behave badly, but there is no substitute for heroes. We are human beings. We have to fall in love with people, and that's extremely important. In fact, on Twitter, somebody responded to my article about the burden of heroes, saying we should not pay attention to people. We should realize that science is a collective endeavor by a whole lot of people. Very true, but we are human beings. Young people cannot fall in love with an amorphous collective. They can fall in love with a Rachel Carson. They can fall in love with a Richard Dawkins. They can fall in love with a Stephen Fry. We need people. We need heroes, however badly they may sometimes behave. So we all must have heroes, and I have many, many heroes. Stephen Fry is one of my great heroes. It's a pleasure to read Stephen Fry, to watch Stephen Fry, to listen to Stephen Fry. If you haven't watched him, please watch him playing the role of Oscar Wilde in the movie Oscar. Please do it. If you haven't read him, read any number of books he has written, wonderful ones on Greek mythology. If you want to listen to him, he has narrated as audiobooks many, many books, not just his, but many other people's, but his are even better. So you can listen to him, you can watch him, you can read him. Not long ago, I heard Stephen Fry, and he blew my mind. First, he praised Stephen King's On Writing 2000, that book that I was reading, and he particularly praised Stephen King's advice on spare writing, to strip away all adverbs. The main message of Stephen King is write very sparingly. Remove all words that you don't like. In fact, Stephen King says, don't use any adverbs. He sometimes grudgingly accepts adjectives. Now he says, this is wonderful. And then what he says in the next sentence. But then Fry said, I have tried to do that with my writing, but it's no good. This is the writer I am. And if people think it's overwritten, overflurried, then so be it. They will have to put the book down and turn to someone else. That's the level of maturity we should reach. We should say, this is wonderful advice, maybe for somebody, but not for me. This is what I'm going to do. Now, they will put the book down and turn to someone else. Stephen Fry's books are bestsellers. Millions of people are reading his book. His books are being translated. So you just have to be bold. And you have to aim high. For each thing, I have heroes. For aiming high, my all-time hero is Leonardo da Vinci. Very few people aimed higher than him. There's a wonderful biography of Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson. Again, it's worth reading. Now, what Walter Isaacson does in this biography is he reads Da Vinci's life and he distills from Da Vinci's life 20 lessons to be learned. Da Vinci didn't write these down. He didn't say these explicitly. But Walter Isaacson distills from Da Vinci's life 20 lessons that we can learn by paying attention to his life. And he lists these 20. And I love them. There are 20. Indeed, there are 20. I would love to give a talk on each one of these. But today I will talk about lesson number 14. Let your reach exceed your grasp. This shocks people. When I put this on Facebook, somebody said, are you sure I will not mixed up your right order word? Do you really mean reach should exceed your grasp? The answer is yes. Now, for many things, your reach should not exceed your grasp. If you are making money, if you are eating food, maybe you should not exceed your grasp. But anything creative, if you are involved in any creative work, you have no choice but to let your reach exceed your grasp. What is the point in having your reach go up to where you can grasp? What's so great about it? I can grasp up to here and I grasp. What do you learn? You learn nothing. You don't even know whether you can grasp beyond this. So your reach should always exceed your grasp so that you know what is possible, what is not possible. Very likely you will know, I can reach up to here. I didn't even know. Or today I can reach here. Yesterday I couldn't. There is no creativity unless you constantly make your reach exceed your grasp. Attempt what you think is not possible. That is the only way of being. As I already said, I have role models. And as I said, I have many role models. But in terms of communicating science, I have met another role model, probably an even more important role model. And this is Jean Henry Faber, 1823 to 1915. Not very recent, but not so old that I cannot relate to him. I can very much relate to him. As you can see, he was fond of insects, and I want to say a little bit about him. Jean Henry Faber. For more than 40 years after his retirement from teaching, the French entomologist and belletrist, I love words which I don't know the meaning of. When I read this sentence, I didn't know the meaning of this, and I love words of this kind. I'll tell you why. I put it in red. I'm going to define that word for you. And belletrist, Jean Henry Faber devoted himself to studying the life, history, habits, and instincts of insects through direct observation. Look at it again. For more than 40 years after his retirement from teaching. What is belletrist? A person who writes essays, particularly on literary and artistic criticism, that are composed and read primarily for their aesthetic effect. How wonderful it would be if we could do this for science. And that's why I love this word, belletrist. His writings bring their mostly unobtrusive words. Now let's pay attention to this sentence. I've taken this from the blurb of their book. His writings bring their mostly unobtrusive words. Their unclear antecedent. Whose? Go back to the first part, insects. So this there refers to insects. Since I've taken it out of context, you cannot make out, but I'm using this to illustrate what is meant by an unclear antecedent. So here, his writings bring insects, mostly unobtrusive words, alive with intricate detail and fascinating anecdote, which enchant like a children's fairy tale despite their thorough scientific grounding. And it is this paradoxical combination which I want to emphasize. Enchant like a children's fairy tale, and yet they are thoroughly scientific. And that is why I feel scientists can become belletrists, because this combination is possible. No wonder Faber was dubbed as the poet of science by one of his biographers, and as the Homer of insects by his contemporary Charles Darwin. One of the metaphors, now I love metaphors. One of the metaphors for writing is cooking. Writing is like cooking. Carefully choose the best ingredients, words, also commas, full stop, semicolons, exclamation marks, etc., and add them in the correct order. Marinate and garnish as required. Adjectives, adverbs, exclamation marks. Cook on a slow flame. Write carefully, write slowly, rewrite. That's what is meant by slow flame. Taste before serving. You read it. Don't write a term paper and say, thank God I don't have to read it, my teacher has to read it. Read it, taste before serving. Then I think we will write very well. My request to you is to fall in love. I know I'm addressing M.Sc and Ph.D. students. I'm probably giving this advice a bit late in your life. You already probably fallen in love, but I believe that you can fall in love with many things and not just one. I am inviting you to fall in love, as I have all my life, with writing. With titles. I'm aghast that some of my students give me an essay without a title. A title is the soul of the essay, the whole of the article. If you don't start with the title, you don't know what you're writing. Of course, I write a title, I write the essay, and then I go and change the title. But I don't begin without a title. Title is the soul. You have to begin with title. And there is so much fun in constructing a title. There's so much. When my students present in our lab meet, sometimes I spend a whole lab meet in discussing the title of their presentation. The titles are extremely important and they give you great pleasure. Beginnings. How do you begin something? And that's extremely important. Dawkins begins one of his books saying, those of us who are going to die are the lucky ones. Can you stop reading the book after that beginning? Those of us who are going to die are the lucky ones. You can't not read it further. Beginnings. Endings. Endings are extremely important. How do you end something? You want to end something in such a way that this lingers in the mind of the reader. The reader cannot get over it. fall in love with the very order of words. What this means, of course, is write like a poet. How does a poet write? A poet is extremely concerned about the order of words. And the poet better be concerned because she has to worry about meters and various things. Extremely concerned. But once a poet writes, that order of words cannot be changed further, cannot be improved further. They are repeated in her mind and in the mind of the rest of the world for centuries, for generations. We still take a poem and recite it as it. We don't change it around because that is the order of words. That's extremely important. So if you write like a poet, then you will imbibe some of those things. Now, my worry sometimes is that for a beginner, with all of this, they may get intimidated. They may say, oh, but I can never reach that level of perfection, so let me wait. No, don't wait. Don't be too modest. And I have a wonderful quote here about don't be too modest. Use the talents you possess, for the woods would be a very silent place if no birds sang except the best. Henry van Dyke, again, of course, a poet, 1852 to 1933. The woods would be a very silent place if no birds sang except the best. And in science, this is even more important because what is the best? The best is a very subjective thing. There is no objective, universally accepted, time immemorially correct best. Best keeps changing place, context, time, genre. So the woods would indeed be very silent if only what we think is the best sings. So use your talents. A question we are often faced is, how do I know if I'm doing okay? What is the measure of success? There are many measures of success. Other people will tell you how many grades you got, how many marks you got, how many copies you sold, did you become bestseller, how many likes you got on Facebook and how many hates you got. Those are not measure success. Measure success has to come from within. You have to feel you're succeeding. I feel I've succeeded if my past writing is now hard for me to better. If I say, oh, I was young, inexperienced, I wrote sloppily, now I can write very well, then that's not good enough. If I say, I can't match that, that was so wonderful. My writing, not other people's writing. It's very easy to say, Wordsworth wrote so well, I can't do better. I wrote something 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and I can't match that anymore. That then is success. If you cannot better what you have done in the past, then what you've done in the past is success. So success always should come from within, not from outside. Outside measures of success are meaningless. You may get Nobel Prize. It doesn't mean anything. You have to feel. Now, in the remaining few minutes, I want over to science writers. I want to address science writers who, as I said, will speak to you for the rest of this week. So of course, some scientists will also speak to you, but a lot of very good science writers will speak to you. Scientists writing well will not drive science writers out of work. This is a great misunderstanding. When I say we write well, then what will they do? No, that is not at all a problem. The role of science writers is vitally important, but I would like to see them as knowledge producers. Science writers should do more than reporting, more than translating the gibberish of scientists into English or into whatever language they have. If scientists do a good job of communicating their science, science writers can concentrate their efforts on creating new knowledge. Scientists should never say, oh, I write badly, but I know somebody else will write it well. This cannot be the attitude. They cannot just be washing our dirty linen. They just cannot be cleaning up our mess. They have much more important things to do, and we should let them do that. Today, I find a lot of science writers have to wade through the awful things that we write, talk to us again and again, try to understand, and write it in a way that others can understand. Where is the time to do other things? Because we do such a bad job. We have to do our job so well that not only we give them time, but we give them a challenge. Okay, now tell me what will you do? I have written this, tell me what will you do? Can you do anything more, anything better than what I have already done? We must not only give them time and opportunity, but we must pose a challenge to them. We must say, you are not needed, and they will show you that they are needed, because science writers are in a better position to make lateral comparisons, to understand the process of science and to detect possible biases and conflicts of interest. This we cannot do. I can say I can write better than you. I can make public understand my science better than you, of course, because I have produced that knowledge. But we cannot say that I can make lateral comparisons better than you. We cannot say that I understand the process of science better than you, because we are creating the science. We are the object and they are studying us. I cannot say, oh, I know all my biases and conflicts. Of course we don't know. There is an enormous body of literature, scientific research which shows that we don't know our biases, we don't know our conflicts of interest, and only a third party can detect this. That is what science writers should do. Science writers should also lace their writing with the flavor of the history, philosophy, sociology, and politics science, which is very hard for scientists to do, because we just are not equipped to do that. We are so there are certain things we can do well, but there are certain things we cannot do, and only others can do it. Now, those others, if they are doing our job, then where is the time for them to do their job? So we have to do our job very well in order for science writers to fulfill all of these things. Is this all possible? The culture of science must change to give prestige to science writers and to accept them as knowledge producers. Not only give them time, space, opportunity, and challenge, but then we must accept them as knowledge producers. We must count them as scientists. In fact, we must admit that in some ways they are more important than scientists. That is how the culture of scientists have changed. We cannot look down upon science writers. I do the research, but he tells others what I have done. This is not a low job. This is a very high job. He detects what I have done, why I have done, how I have done, and what may be the flaws in what I have done. He or she detects. That should be the relationship between scientists and science writers. Both scientists and science writers should produce and communicate knowledge, but each one a different kind of knowledge, because one cannot produce the other kind of knowledge. The pursuit of science should become a more democratic and inclusive activity. The boundaries of what we count as new scientific knowledge needs to be expanded. If somebody detects a certain bias or conflict of interest or a certain comparison which is actually biased my knowledge production, that discovery that I came to this conclusion for this reason is new scientific knowledge, as valuable as the original knowledge itself. And that is what we need to expect. We must stop packaging science as a sophisticated, expensive activity that only a few highly trained, privileged people can undertake. This is the biggest problem with science. We must stop this, then we will have many more scientists and many more things called science. In an ideal world, the same person should double up as scientist and science writer, sometimes doing the one for her own work and sometimes the other for others' work. And this brings me to a very interesting point. I can be a scientist today when I'm telling the world about what I did. Tomorrow I can be a science writer doing all of that, making lateral comparisons, finding out biases, finding out conflicts of interest, looking at the politics of science for other people's work. And similarly, the science writer can spend some time doing science and some time. So the same person can do both, but these are two different things. They can be, you have to wear two different hats to do that, and it's very important to recognize them. How can we bring about such a paradigm shift? I began with this and I said it is possible. It is not possible for my generation. I think we have messed up. There is some hope for Dr. Anindita Bhadra's generation. I find that generation is doing very well. But there is a great hope for your generation, the M.Sc and Ph.D students I am talking to. Students should not blindly accept the world that is handed down to them by their teachers, but they should try to tear it apart and create a better world. Why do you accept people say? If you say this is physics and that's chemistry, why do you say accept this boundary that we have drawn between physics and chemistry? You must say, no, I don't believe in this boundary. Boundary doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. This is not how you should divide knowledge. Everything that is given to you, don't take it as gospel. In fact, try and disprove everything that you said. If I tell you the earth is not flat, try to prove that the earth is flat. When you fail, you will know that it's correct. So don't accept anything at face value. Try to break everything that you find, try to tear apart everything that you find, then we will have a better world. And that's the only way that the world can change. I am done. Thank you.
Thank you. That was brilliant. We can take questions from the participants, and I'll check if there are questions on
I
YouTube.
stop sharing screen, I suppose.
Yes, sir. You can.
That you can see. Or I simply come to this window. Yeah, I come to this window. Okay. I can. Okay.
I think you need to stop sharing first, otherwise we can't see you.
Stop presenting. I think that's what it means, right?
Yeah, right. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So yes, if people have questions, you can raise your hands. There's a raise hand button at the bottom of the screen. Yes, Apeksha.
Sir, so how can we potentially bridge the science communication gap between, say, writing for a newspaper and writing for a technical journal? As you said, aiming for an idealistic science world.
This is my proposition 2, which I said is not yet easy to realize. I tell you what the problem is. I don't know the solution, but I know the problems, and that's half the battle. I don't know about science writers, they actually do a much better job. But when scientists write for a scientific journal and write for a newspaper, we sometimes do both, let's admit. So when we write for the scientific journal, we assume too much knowledge on the part of our readers. And when we write a newspaper, we assume too little knowledge. In fact, we don't even assume intelligence. This has to change. When you write in a scientific journal, also you should expect that everybody will not know what you already know. When you write for the newspaper, you should not think that the people who are reading that are deaf and dumb and they don't know anything. So this gap has to change. You see, these are two extreme things. When I write for a journal, I think my readers know everything. And when I write for a newspaper, I think my readers know nothing. Both of these are false. And we should have something in between. And that's a very, very insufficient answer to your question, but that's how we can begin.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Kevin Philip has a question.
Yes, sir, I have a question. So actually, I have
Anindita,
two.
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sir, actually, I have two questions. The first one is, so initially you told that we should pay attention to the forms rather than the contents, and we should so we should discover styles of ourselves, right? So to be a better writer or to be a best writer. So my question is, so to be a beginner or to be being a budding researcher, so initially I think that that overrules us is an apprehension, like whether my writings would be accepted by the public. So we'll be apprehended, like a fright, a fear of writing is there. So how to overcome that? To the common public or to the science world, if you write something, a fear of apprehension, like whether my writing is going to get accepted.
Let
How
me
to
answer
overcome
that
that?
before you ask the second question. Huh? Have you
Yes,
done
sir.
with the first question? Okay, let me
Yes,
answer
yes,
that.
I have.
So yes, and you would be very disappointed later in life if you think this apprehension is only for a beginning student. For a retired professor also, we have the same apprehension. So this is not going to go away. You have to learn to live with this for the rest of your life. So you will be a very disappointed person if you think it's going to go away as soon as you finish your degree. This is a lifelong problem. What is the solution to that? I have a very simple solution. I write for myself. I don't write for others. Because I have to be satisfied. Now, if I do that, first of all, because I'm writing for myself, in the beginning, I don't worry about what my publisher and my copy editor will say. That is not in my mind at all. I write for myself. And then, as I said, I do all of that. I choose the ingredients, add them carefully, and read to myself. Am I satisfied? Is it better than what I wrote yesterday? So, if you do a lot of this, then the chances are that the outside world is more likely to accept. We cannot guarantee. This is a world of probability. You take vaccination, there is some chance that you will not get COVID, but there is no guarantee. So in this world, there are no certainties. But if you take vaccination, the severity of your next infection, statistically speaking, will be lower than if you are not taking vaccination. Similarly, if you do all of this, then the probability that somebody else will like what you write is slightly higher than if you didn't do all this. You wrote it because of a chore and throw it at somebody and then expect them to like it. The chances are less. So you can slowly move in the direction of removing this problem by writing for yourself, satisfying yourself, and making it then available to the whole world. Doesn't guarantee, but I think it will slightly increase the probability. You had another?
Yeah, sir. Yeah, my second question is, sir. So you told that scientists should publish it 3 times, one for the technical audience, and for a non-technical scientific audience, and for a non-scientific audience. So if suppose it's, sir,
You may not agree with it.
yeah, suppose, yeah. So if I create a style of my own, so I should make amendments to that style so that I should write to technical audience in such a way, a non-technical to such a way, and non-scientific audience to such a in such a way, sir.
You remember my slide with 2 propositions? Because the
Yeah.
second proposition is not yet true, maybe you have to do that. But if you succeed in making the second proposition come true, then you don't have to do it. That's
Then it's
one
not.
fine.
Yeah.
So this is a stopgap arrangement. In an ideal world, that will not be necessary.
Okay, sir.
Create that ideal world. You have the opportunity. I'm too old. You have the opportunity. Create that ideal world where this will not be required.
Okay, sir.
Okay, Onjira has her hand raised. Go ahead.
Yes.
Hello, sir. So you basically mentioned that we should write the scientific paper such a way that it is acceptable, like a lay person can also understand that. But we have to submit the papers to certain journals, and they decide what we are going to, like what they are going to publish. So how do we even start the change if they are not ready to accept the change?
Absolutely. I wish I could pull out. I have a very nice image which I show when people ask such questions. The image is the following. Like I have to describe the image now. I can't find it right now. The image is of a horse, a really strong, thoroughbred race horse, and it has been tied to a flimsy plastic chair. And the horse says, "How can I run? I've been tied." Why? Because it doesn't even try. So you have to try and fail. And then you will see how to try. If you start by imagining, oh, journals will not accept, therefore I will do it. Remember, first step, write for yourself. I can show you, if you give me, if you want, I can show you copies of articles that I've written for myself and then have been spoiled by the editor. I have both. I'll tell you an interesting story. I once was invited to write an article. I wrote an article and the editor kept on changing it, kept on changing. We fought a great deal. Finally, we came to some compromise, which was not the editor's version, not my version, but some other version. I was not happy with it, but it was much better than what the editor had tried to rewrite from the original thing. And finally, there was no time, and this was done over a 7-8 hour period when I was sitting in the airport waiting for my delayed flight. So finally, we agreed, and that got published. I came home and I read what was published, and I found one sentence that was the same as the original I wrote. I said, aha, so there is no plagiarism. So I published the original also in another journal. So willing to publish it. So I have both. I can give you this both and you can see. So you try. You can't imagine that there's a barrier and not try. Keep trying. If you spend all your life hitting against the barrier and failing, you are still a much better person than one who says, what's the point? The door is locked. What's the point even trying to open it? Don't be like a horse which is trying to open it. And believe me, when lots of students ask me this question, it's all hearsay. How many papers that you have, Anjira Sen Gupta, how many papers have you submitted to a journal which have been rejected because your writing style is bad? Tell me, how many? 2, 3, 4? How many have you submitted?
I am still on the writing process.
Rejection should not enter your mind. This is the point. See, when I go to heaven, if the door is locked, what do I do? That should not be your concern. You should, if you tell me, here are my 6 papers, they've all been rejected, what do I do? Then I can give you a different advice. If you imagine roadblocks in a place where you have not entered, that's not good.
We'll try and we'll keep trying.
Don't imagine roadblock. Be bold. Go ahead and see what happens. Open the door and see. Maybe it's not locked, Maybe I can drag the plastic chair and run. This is the problem with people. They imagine roadblocks. Don't imagine roadblocks. One of the reasons, I mean, people don't do this because they're stupid. There's a reason why they do it. Because they feel it's so much work involved. That is the problem. That should not be the attitude. That you should enjoy what you write. If you enjoy what you write, who cares if it is rejected? That editor is stupid. He doesn't understand what I'm writing. I wrote it. I enjoy it. I'll send it to Anindita and she will like it. Fine. So do it for yourself. Do everything for yourself and then give it to the world if the world wants. If the world doesn't want, doesn't matter. It's not going to happen that Anjira Sen Gupta is going to remain unpublished for the rest of life. Believe me, if you do that, you are more likely to get published. Self-confidence which you do think will make a huge difference. So don't imagine roadblocks.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Apeksha has a hand raised.
So I had a follow-up question. So you mentioned that there needs to be some middle ground between the two extreme situations where, say, the audience is familiar with science and where it is not. So to achieve that middle ground, we would also probably need collaborations with policymakers. We can see this during the present pandemic situation where government has put a lot of restrictions in the communication of content related to COVID-19 by the scientists to the public.
Yes.
So how to start in that direction of, mutual discussions and collaborations?
Okay, I can only tell you what I would do. See, I'm not so knowledgeable about this that I can give advice. I'll tell you what I would do. This question of collaboration always comes up. And the way I proceed is this. People say it's very important to have collaboration. Some people say, no, you should do everything yourself. None of these things make any sense. I start doing something. Until I find that I cannot do it, why should I go for collaboration? The moment I find, no, I cannot solve this problem, but I know that so and so can solve the problem. So all of this should come organically as required, whether it's interdisciplinarity, whether it is collaboration, whether it is using of mathematics, whether it is of traveling, whatever it is, do it when you need it. Don't do it because it's a matter of principle that you do. We should. So I find, government says we'll give you a scholarship for people who want to collaborate. I find that the institutions say we have separate money. We'll give you money if the investigators from two different departments. This is a foolish thing to do. Why should the quality of science does not depend on collaboration? Certain kinds of science needs collaboration, and you will know it when you need it. You will know that you will need the collaboration. So cross the bridge when you reach it. Don't imagine bridges beforehand. Keep doing what you want. When you know that you can't do it, and when you know somebody will automatically enter into collaboration. If you know that I want to do a comparative study of some species of insect in India and South America, you will realize that one day you will have to go to South America or you will have to collaborate with somebody in South America. Don't make that the starting point of your research. Keep doing things, and then as you go along, incorporate whatever is required as and when it is required. Then it will be more natural, it will be more organic, and it will be more successful.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Anindita.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, sir. Sir, my question is about splitting infinitives. You put that under grammar rules, and isn't it more of a style choice? It's a fairly recent rule to not split infinitives.
Depends on whom you ask. There are some purists who think it's a grammatical error to split an infinitive. Others think it's a matter of style. What I would do is, if somebody objects to using split infinitive as a general principle, then what I would do is I would use a split infinitive deliberately, but in such a way that people will appreciate it. That's the challenge. If I can't do that, then I have no business to complain. I have to say, yes, sir, no split infinitive. Take up that challenge. Use a split infinitive and make people appreciate it. In fact, people should not just accept it because they haven't noticed it. They should say, this sentence reads so well because of the split infinitive. If the split infinitive was not there, it wouldn't have looked so good. Split infinitive is complicated. I'll make it easy for you to understand by taking other examples. People say, don't write long sentences. Write a beautiful long sentence so that people will say, this sentence is beautiful because it is long. If you had split this into a small sentence, it would not have been beautiful. That is the challenge. People say, don't write in passive voice, write only in active voice. If you don't like that rule, if you like that rule, fine. If you don't like that rule, write something in passive voice such that people will say, The beauty of this lies in its passive voice. That should be the attitude to any advice that people give you. Okay, if your parents tell you don't do this, you do that, and then do in such a way that your parents say, I'm glad you did this. I'm glad you disagreed with me. I didn't even realize that this is the way to do. That should be your challenge. Any rule given to you, any advice given to you, that should be your challenge.
Also, when it comes from supervisors.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I was thinking of to boldly go where no man has gone before from Star Trek.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's a split infinitive and sounds great.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are so many things which defy the commonly accepted rules, which are wonderful because they defy. But everybody cannot defy. It's not easy. It's very easy to mess up your sentence by using a split infinitive. It's much easier not to use a split infinitive. That's the easy option out. But if you have the courage and if you have the passion about something, you have passion or split infinitive, I may have something else. But if you are passionate, then defy and show that it works. Then life becomes worth living. Otherwise, it's a chore. Life is a chore otherwise. Take challenges.
And
Okay,
how are
any
you, sir?
questions?
Fine, thank you. Thank you. Nice to see you.
You too.
Okay, we have a question from Sunaina Singh on YouTube.
Okay.
She's asking, any tips or resource for fact checking during science writing?
This is where you will have a galaxy of really good professional people talking to you during the rest of this course. Ask them and tell me what they say. Because I know there are ways. I am not very good at this, but I know that science writers specialize on this. You tell them some baloney, they will tell you it is baloney. So they know how to do it. Many science writers are very good at this. I have not done it very much, but ask this question in the rest of the week. I'm sure you'll get very good answers, and I hope somebody will tell me what those answers are. But it's very interesting. So in fact, in a book I was reading last night, there was a description about Carl Sagan. You know, Carl Sagan, so Carl Sagan said, amongst all other things, he was the greatest baloney buster. So he would find out if you are telling him something that's nonsense. And that's an art that one has to develop. Of course, you can also do it in the digital world. I mean, just imagine, I always discuss this in my undergraduate class, when I discuss plagiarism. Just, okay, plagiarism, a bad thing, we should not do it, all fine. But go beyond that and just imagine. There's a software which instantly checks your text against many, many pages. In fact, they claim billions, if not billions, even millions of pages. How does this work? Can you think of how you could write a software which will check your text and check with everything else that has been written in the world before? That itself should make life so interesting that it is possible to do that. So there are tools which people have developed, but as I said, much better answer you will get from the people who will speak to you in the rest of the week. They are the professionals.
Since I'm not seeing any raised hands, I was just thinking when you mentioned plagiarism.
Yes.
You know, of course, it's important to not plagiarize, but I often think when we did not have these tools,
Yes.
you and I could be writing the very same sentence out of our heads, and just because we think similarly on certain topics, and it would be called plagiarism today if those two texts were matched. So, you know, there's always this problem of where you draw a line. Sometimes we make it so technical.
Sure.
And I remember, you know, my student's thesis came back with all yellow highlights saying, you know, this very high percentage of plagiarism from the library. And when we are checking these, the plagiarized text is basically references to his own papers.
Yes.
And he has 10 published papers. So all of them are plagiarized because it's all published.
Absolutely.
So what do you
These plagiaristic softwares are very smart in one way, but they're utterly stupid in another way. When I want to quote somebody, I put in quotation marks. It counts those also. It counts references. In fact, I am not familiar with this, but somebody told me you can do plagiarism. I said, wonderful, let me do it. So I had just written something. I said, I'll put my own thing and let us see what it says. It said something is plagiarized. What was that? It said, I thank the Department of Science and Technology for funding.
Yes, that always comes up in plagiarism.
So you have to take all this with a pinch of salt. See, there is no black and white. You understand? Now, my own attitude is the following. For very young people, I would say, let us err on the other side. Let us not plagiarize anything. Now, when you become Shakespeare, you can maybe justify some reason why something sounds very similar to somebody else. But we begin by erring on the other side, because it is also true that there is rampant actual criminal plagiarism. It's very rampant, and we want to curb that. I think everybody will agree that that should be curbed. So my own personal attitude would be, let us begin by erring on this side. So if somebody says this sentence is already written by somebody else, I'll say, okay, he came first, she came first, I came second, so I withdraw, I will rewrite. I will, even though it is true that I may have written independently. So let us start with erring on this side, simply because there is a pandemic of plagiarization. We have, when pandemic, we have to do things differently. No, today we are not doing things normally. So in a pandemic, you have to do special things, call for special measures. So since there is a pandemic of plagiarization going on, let us err on the other side. Let us be more careful. It may well be true that I have written independently, but if pointed out, I will rewrite. I will say, okay, you came first, so you get it. I'll write differently. Maybe I'll write better than you. That's how I would begin. But what is actually even more dangerous is people say self-plagiarization. Okay, so see, again, it depends on the context. If I do one experiment, have a result, have a graph, have a gel picture or something, put it in one paper and put the same in another paper and claim that I have repeated the experiment and this is the result, that is a dangerous kind of self-plagiarization. If I describe something, if I have described something very well in one sentence and copy that in another sentence, that is less of a problem. So it's all grey, but in order to curb the pandemic, we have to start by using an iron hand in the beginning, and then we go into the grey area later.
Yes, absolutely. We actually see a lot of this, especially when we have assignments for students to write. So that's where the entire lesson begins, I guess. Okay, so are there any more questions from the participants? If not, then we can wrap up the session on time. I think you and I will keep discussing if we start, so I will not get into this mode. But if participants don't have any other questions, then let's thank Professor Gadagkar for this wonderful session, and we are looking forward to the write-up on this. Okay. Hopefully it's going to come soon. And of course, we'll have the recording on YouTube, so that you can follow up later. We will, the participants need to stay on in Google Meet for some time. But the other guests can leave now. And thank you, sir, for joining us once again. And any other session that you are interested in, you're most welcome to join.
Very much. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I'll try my best to drop in whenever I can if I don't have any pre-commitments.
Sure.
Enjoy the rest of the week. This is going to be great fun, I can assure you.